Fisher was born in Socrates, New York. His father was a teacher and a congregational minister who raised his son to believe he must be a useful member of society. As a child, he had a remarkable set of mathematical skills and a flair for invention. A week after he was admitted to Yale College, his father died at age 53. Irving then supported his mother, brother, and himself mainly by tutoring. He graduated first in his class with a BA in 1888, having also been elected as a member of Skull and Bones Society, an undergraduate senior secret student society at Yale University. The oldest senior class society at the university, Skull and Bones has become a cultural institution known for its powerful alumni. In 1891, Fisher received the first PhD in economics granted by Yale. As a student, Fisher had shown particular talent and inclination for mathematics, but he found that economics offered greater scope for ambition and social concerns. His thesis, published by Yale in 1892 as Mathematical Investigations in the Theory of Value and Prices, was a rigorous development of the theory of general equilibrium. After graduating from Yale, Fisher studied in Berlin and Paris. From 1890 onward, he remained at Yale, first as a tutor, then after 1898 as a professor of political economy. Now, we'll go into the published and well-renowned works of economist Irving Fisher. First, we'll take a look at his college thesis. Mathematical Investigations in the Theory of Value and Prices was a rigorous development of the theory of general equilibrium. When he began writing the thesis, Fisher had not been aware that French mathematical economist Leon Walras and his continental European disciples had already discovered similar grounds. Nonetheless, Fisher's work was a very significant contribution. It was immediately recognized and praised as first-rate work by such European masters as Francis Edgeworth. The work contains a preface written by Fisher for the 1925 edition published by Yale. In his publication titled The Theory of Interest, out of all his works, is especially significant. Not only does it contain his celebrated theory in which the rate of interest is shown to be dependent upon all other elements involving productivity, time preference, risk, and uncertainty, but also a strikingly original explanation of the broader capitalistic process. In the book, The Rate of Interest, several concepts are named after him, which is introduced in this work, including the Fisher equation, Fisher hypothesis, and Fisher separation theorem. His most enduring intellectual work has been his theory of capital, investment, and interest rates, first exposited in The Nature of Capital and Income 1906 and elaborated in The Rate of Interest in 1907. The Nature of Capital and Income offers here a rational foundation for the most fundamental of concepts behind the modern economics, capital and income. This 1906 book explores such ideas as the difference between wealth and property rights, why one bankruptcy leads to another, the difficulties of defining income, the premium and price concepts of interest, risk in the economic arena, and much more. Now, we'll look at some economic theories that had been established by Irving Fisher himself. During his time as an economist, these theories were popularized. First, the Fisher effect, which examines the link between the inflation rule, nominal interest rates, and real interest rates. The equation states that a country's current nominal interest rate is equal to a real interest rate adjusted for the rate of inflation, and the two move together. For instance, if a country's nominal interest rate is 5% and its inflation rate is 10%, the country's real interest rate is 15%. The Fisher effect is an important tool by which lenders can gauge whether or not they are making money on a granted loan. Unless the rate charged is above and beyond the economy's inflation rate, a lender will not profit from the interest.
The Fisher effect describes the relationship between the inflation rate and the nominal interest rate. Suppose your grandma lends you $100 at an interest rate of 10%. That's right, this grandma has an interest rate. But suppose also that over the year, the inflation rate is 10%. So at the end of the year, you pay your grandma back $110. That looks pretty good on paper, but during that year, money has become less valuable. Due to inflation, what used to cost $100 now costs $110. So what's your grandma's real return? 0. More generally, we can write that the real interest rate is equal to the nominal rate, the rate charged on paper, minus the inflation rate. Inflation reduces the real return on a loan. So, if grandma expected the inflation rate to be 10%, then in order to get a real return of 5%, she must charge you a nominal interest rate of 15%. Now, you may think grandma's cold for charging you a 15% interest rate, But she isn't alone in this behavior. Everyone does it, and it's called the Fisher effect, named after the great American economist Irving Fisher.
The Fisher separation theorem proposes that a firm's choice of investment is separate from its owner's investment preferences, and therefore the firm should only be motivated to maximize profits. In other words, the firm should not care about the utility preferences of shareholders for reinvestment. Instead, it should aim for an optimal production function that will result in highest profits possible for the shareholders. Fisher's quantity theory of money states that money supply and price level in an economy are in direct proportion to one another. When there's a change in the supply of money, there is a proportional change in the price level and vice versa. The theory also assumes that the quantity of money, which is determined by outside forces, is the main influence of economic activity in society. Each variable represents the following: M equals money supply, V equals circulation of velocity, P equals average price level, and T volume of transactions of goods and services. A change in money supply results in changes in price levels and or change in supply of goods and services. It is primarily these changes in money stock that cause a change in spending. And the velocity of circulation depends not on the amount of money available or on the current price level, but on the changes in price level. Now we'll take a look at the impact that the great economist Irving Fisher had on society. Believe it or not, Fisher's biggest impact to society did not come all from his work in the field of economics. I know, right? Who would have thought an economist would have done more than just study the economy? Due to his 3-year battle with tuberculosis, Fisher became more significant as an advocate for social and health campaigns. He co-founded the Life of Extension Institute and wrote a book on How to Live, Rules for Healthful Living Based on Modern Science in 1915. He also wrote an anti-smoking article for the Reader's Digest on the negative effects of tobacco, and he also supported the 18th Amendment, defending it by writing 3 booklets on the grounds of public health and economic productivity. Now, we take a look at the influence that Irving Fisher had on other fellow economists. There is a significant influence of Irving Fisher's writings on Milton Friedman's work in monetary economics. We focus first on Fisher's influence in monetary theory. The Chicago School of the 1930s absorbed Fisher's approach, and Friedman learned from them. However, in some obvious aspects of Friedman's work, we can clearly detect a major influence of Fisher's writings on Friedman's. Thus, for example, with the buildup in inflation in the 1960s, Friedman adopted the Fisher effect and Fisher's empirical approach to inflationary expectations into his analysis. Thus, Fisher's influence on Friedman was both indirect through the Chicago School and direct. Regardless of the weight attached, the two influences, Fisher's impact on Friedman was transparent as it was for many other economists such as James Tobin, Maurice Elias, Hyman Minsky, and several more. Finally, we'll go over a brief summary to summarize the life and influence of Irving Fisher. Irving Fisher was one of America's greatest mathematical economists and one of the clearest economic writers of all time. He had the intellect to use mathematics in virtually all of his theories, and the good sense to introduce it only after he had clearly explained the central principle in words. In 1891, Fisher received the first PhD in economics granted by Yale. His thesis, published by Yale in 1892 as Mathematical Investigations in the Theory of Value and Prices, was a rigorous development of the general equilibrium theory. Fisher is probably best remembered today in neoclassical economics for his theory of capital, investment, and interest rates, first exposited in his The Nature of Capital and Income, 1906. The stock market crash of 1929 and subsequent Great Depression cost Fisher much of his personal wealth and academic reputation. He famously predicted 9 days before the crash that the stock prices had reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. Fisher was so discredited by his 1929 pronouncements that few people took notice of his debt deflation analysis of the Depression, seen here in this video.
Stocks have fallen in a week 30%, and a week ago they had fallen some 10% from the previous high of this year. The real reason, as I understand it, for this drop is that people have been speculating on small margins. It was not that the stock market was very much too high, but that people were so enthusiastic about making the money that they properly expected to make in the investment of stocks, tried to do business on a shoestring. They went into debt. And the real lesson of this market is, if you buy stocks, buy them with your own money and not with borrowed money any more than can be helped. If that lesson is learned, possibly in the end, this experience to some people may be a blessing in disguise. This country is fundamentally sound, and the technical situation in the stock market is not going to prevent the great improvement, progressive improvement in our wonderful prosperity.
People instead eagerly turned to the ideas of Keynes. He had a widespread influence on the economic world, but mainly on certain economies. Irving Fisher's writings had an influence on Milton Friedman's work in monetary economics. This is transparent by focusing on the Fisher hypothesis and his quantity theory of money. A 3-year struggle with tuberculosis beginning in 1898 left Fisher with a profound interest in health and hygiene. He took up vegetarianism and exercise and wrote a national bestseller titled How to Live, Rules for Healthful Living based on modern science, whose value he demonstrated by living until 80. Even though he was regarded as the most influential economist of his time, many of Irving Fisher's theories were considered controversial. Nonetheless, he was revered in the economic society. Irving Fisher passed away at the age of 80 on April 29, 1947. Many of his theories and ideals are still applied in today's modern economic society. I hope you guys enjoyed this just as much as I enjoyed making it for you, and I hope you guys learned some new things about a great economist in Irving Fisher. That's all for now. The end, and thanks.